Alright, hi everyone. So today, I thought I'd go ahead and make a history video, talk about um, the what happened to Persia after the Arab conquests in the 7th century. Um, so, a lot changes in Persia compared to, the classical Persian civilization, but there's a lot of continuity, so I'll go over that a little bit and I'll suggest some reading material. And I'll talk today about basically from the collapse of the Sasanian Empire in late antiquity up to just before the Seljuk invasion and the Seljuk Empire in the around the 12th century. So here on the map, this is the Abbasid Caliphate in the 9th century, but it's a good map for talking about the early conquests. So just to give a little background, obviously, there's a general Arab conquest in the 7th century, and that's the Islamic Movement. Other historians, there's like Robert Hoyland suggests it was more of like similar to the Germans. You have a bunch of different groups, but at any rate, eventually it coalesces around the first caliphate, the Rushden Caliphate, and they're the ones that move into Persia, the Sasanian Empire, which had been weakened by wars with the Romans, and they move in and conquer Persia. Now, in that, it's important to note a lot of, and what I'm going to get into a little bit is the Persian civilization of the classical period didn't really die off in that. So, of course, obviously things changed, and Persia has had foreign in quotation marks dynasties throughout its history. It's pretty consistent, but what the conquest of Persia really does for the early Islamic Empire is to have it gives a lot of people that know about basically how to administer a state. And that becomes more apparent when we move into the uh, Umayyad period, although the Umayyad period was a largely Arab dynasty and they were centered in Damascus. However, there's the Abbasid Revolution in the 700s, and a lot of that was motivated by the people living in, basically the frontier of the Islamic world at that time. So Khorasan, Sistan, the sort of further reaches of Iran and parts of Central Asia, Transoxiana, and they felt as if basically they were not accepted. They were not on the same level as the Arab elite. So a lot of these people were Muslims, but they were not really treated the same. Or this is what the records and the research has kind of painted a picture of over time. And the Abbasid movement topples the Umayyads, who then flee to Spain, and then they set up a new capital in Baghdad over time. It's kind of an indication of the shifting of the focus. The Abbasids are a more Eastern-looking empire in some ways, and it's really in the Abbasid period. This is where all those Persian traditions really become apparent. So you have a lot of a lot of bad school textbooks. They teach about the Islamic Golden Age. It's a little more complicated than that, as these things usually are. It was really a lot of yes, obviously it's an Islamic empire, but you have a lot of that classical Persian knowledge that is part that becomes a lot bigger part of the thought at this time. So thinking about the sciences and science and political philosophy, that sort of thing. Again, it's all these people, all these sort of the Persianate tradition that had been so strong going back to the classical period becomes really dominant in the Abbasid Caliphate. And you can read a good book about this is by a historian named Richard Fry. I don't think I was able to get an image of it, but he wrote a book called it's the Golden Age of Persia. I'm going to look this up. Yeah, Golden Age of Persia. Find it pretty inexpensively on Amazon in paperback. Phoenix Press, 2000, published the year 2000. Good book, talks about that, and basically you have under the Abbasid period kind of a Persianate Renaissance, and in a lot of ways the Persian language starts to assert itself and become more dominant over Arabic. And again, one of those things where the domination of the Arab elite is less certain. Now that's kind of and then you have after the Abbasids, the Abbasid Caliphate in the late 9th century starts to lose some of its power, and it's because basically the more and more Turkic peoples are moving into the region from Central Asia into the Middle East and are rapidly establishing themselves as a military power. Over time, the Abbasid Caliph kind of loses his true authority. He kind of more becomes a figurehead and is basically managed by different, military groups in Baghdad. But that opens the door for some other dynasties. Let me go to my other map here. So we've got, as you can see, by the 10th century, you have, by the late 9th, 10th centuries, you've got these different dynasties that move in, and this is what, like in the Fry book, he says this is kind of what ends this Persian Renaissance in Iran, and it becomes kind of domination by these Turkic dynasties. So you've got the Ghaznavids, but you've got some of these other ones as well, listed in the Mapuids, Karmatians, etc. So that's kind of the historical overview. And I can go to the books. I think the overview kind of ran kind of a long time, but so the first books I would recommend is if you couldn't find it, you can probably find these in PDF on the left, or get it used off eBay or something like that. Cambridge History of Iran. I'm working through the volumes that interest me right now. And they have multiple volumes. So if you're interested in the classical period, you can read those ones as well. But for our purposes today, we've got volume 4 that covers basically kind of the period I'm discussing in more detail, from the Arab invasion to the Seljuks. And that other book I mentioned before that I didn't post the cover of, Richard Fry, The Golden Age of Persia. And you should also check out the book of C.E. Bosworth about the Ghaznavids. So they are one of these Turkic kind of dynasties in Iran, and he wrote 2 books. So this is the later Ghaznavids, but he wrote the first volume about the earlier part of the dynasty. You can find them on PDF online and used. Really good, and he also gets into the military structure of the Ghaznavids a lot, which is nice. I may make a video just about them later, but I need to go back and make some notes about that. And he was a really good historian. He died 2015, I think, something like that, relatively recently, past several years at any rate. Anyway, really good historian, and he contributes to some of the chapters in this book, Cambridge History of Iran. And I think the Cambridge History of Iran is also good. It's not like something you would necessarily have to read cover to cover. I didn't, because a big part of the book is like about art and literature. I didn't really have as much interest in that, so I just skipped those chapters. But each chapter is written by sort of a subject matter expert in that area, and they're really good. And they have they published Cambridge has published a bunch of other ones. I just read some chapters from the one of Byzantium. It was really good. So definitely check that out. And then in terms of, and this is just some pictures I found of the Goddess Navids. Kind of interesting. They've got kind of these mailed coats, it looks like, or maybe it's like a, I don't know, it's the linked small metal plates. I think that's what it is. I forget the actual term for that. I got another picture of the Ghaznavids there. They're quite interesting. I may do a video on them at some point, like I said. But I would say overall, a lot of these, I guess the main takeaway that I found in sort of doing some reading on this is, there were a lot of changes. So the Zoroastrians were repressed pretty heavily. That's pretty well attested to, and then a lot of them fled to India. So that's where we get I think the Parsis today are descended from those Zoroastrians. But in terms of a lot of the political thought, it was pretty consistent with pre-Muslim Persian ideas of kingship, and then that gets kind of disseminated throughout the Muslim world, especially by the Turks and the influence of the Mongols. So in some ways, again, a lot of changes, but a lot of consistency from that earlier classical period. And in fact, I think a lot of the material that we know about the Sasanians comes from these Islamic scholars, in their time, kind of appraising the Sasanian system and trying to figure out, what made them successful and that sort of thing. But I wish I had some kind of sources maybe that you guys could read, but I don't really know anything in translation that's worthwhile. But I might come back to this, revisit this subject, and do a better presentation in the future. Another series of books to check out that I don't have pictures for, but it's kind of regarded as a classic, is The Venture of Islam, 3 volumes. I found that was pretty helpful when I got into this area of history. Kind of dry in some ways, but the author, Marshall Hodgson, he wrote it in the 60s or 70s. Kind of shows the connections between, the Islamic dynasties and then the earlier classical, antique history. That's his interpretation anyway. And he also talks about this Persian period in some detail. Can be those volumes. It's 3 volumes. I think there is a single volume version. They can be kind of dry, and some of the chapters, you might just want to skip. I know when I had to read it for a project I was doing, there was definitely parts I didn't care for, but I think overall, if you're interested in looking into this, that's worth checking out. But like I said, I think the best, just if you want a good, well-written crash course, is the Cambridge History of Iran. I found that to be just the most helpful. So That's my overview. I hope you enjoyed it. I will try and maybe put something together that's a little more rehearsed in the future, maybe, if people like this subject. But I think anytime I make videos like this, I just prefer people go and try and read these things for themselves and learn something and yeah, read, I guess. So thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you all in the next one.